Okay, so our next speaker is again one of our long-standing members and is also someone who helped support my parents when I was first born. It's Mary Cox.
Good afternoon, everyone. I too have come to share a personal story, but one I hope will stimulate some thought for you. It's not to give you answers or to tell you the right or wrong way of doing things. It's to tell you about my family and its experience and involvement and impact that it's had from Aniridia over the last 100 years. In fact, that 100 years started here in Bristol with a couple who lived in a suburb of the city called Stapleton. The husband and wife were both sighted and they had their firstborn. I don't know exactly how or when the diagnosis came, but that firstborn person, my father, had Aniridia. It was a shock for them, and they certainly didn't have the knowledge that the Aniridia UK group organisation has brought us now, or the investigations that are being made and the advancements and trials that we're having. My family's memory is going to Bristol's Eye Hospital, and my father always dreaded going to that eye hospital because as you go in, there's a picture of a consultant that you walk underneath as you go in. It was the consultant that he had as a child and told him and his family, and he remembers this, as a young boy, there was no hope. And that he should never have his eyes touched, nothing could be done. It was really, the future was not good. My grandparents, understandably, were almost panicked. They became very overprotective of their son. And right the way through his life as a young man, his phrase to me was, "I was killed with love." And the problem was his brother, who was born a few years later, didn't have Aniridia. And there grew up a lot of jealousy from the brother that existed throughout the coming generations, I'm afraid, because my father always had special attention and very much affection from the family. My father's view was they felt sorry for him, but and they had low expectations. There was a school here in Bristol at the time for blind children, but it was a school with workshops. And blind children in those days, if you went to school and you came out, you were lucky if you had been trained as a piano tuner, a basket weaver, somebody did cane work, making cane chairs, and those sort of things. My grandparents decided they didn't want that for their son. They wanted more. And in fact, I suppose as he grew up, he wasn't really blind in their terms. Blind for them meant seeing nothing. So overprotective they were, but low expectations they had. As my father, in retrospect, told me something about what he felt, as a little bit like we were hearing from Harry this morning. He certainly was very worried that he wasn't a full man. He felt very embarrassed about that, and it's a phrase he used when he got down. I remember him saying that. He was worried because he didn't go to the local school like his brother did. His parents paid for him to go to a small private school in Bristol because they didn't want him to go to the blind school. So hence the jealousy. Brother became jealous. He had special education, nicer school than him. My father was brought up at the school. He did well because he saw quite a lot. He always had to be very close to pages, and he had thick pebble glasses. But the school trained him to be in copper plate writing and bookkeeping, and he was very good at both. What a shame they didn't know what the future was. They didn't understand that his sight was going to get worse. And in fact, those skills that he was so good at weren't going to last him a lifetime. He tried enlisting in the Second World War, and he got rejected. And for men of that generation, to fail the medical, a big impact on him. And again, this is a part of him not being a full man. But he still had a go and played his part. He did as much as he could, as Harry was telling us earlier. He actually joined St John Ambulance, and he became a superintendent in St John Ambulance, and during the blackouts he even drove ambulances when they were short of staff. Scary, isn't it?
And how many casualties?
May I tell you that by this stage they'd moved to a little village outside Weston-super-Mare, which is not far from here, and he wasn't driving in a big town, he was driving around the country lanes that he cycled around. And of course in the dark with the blackout, very little light, his vision probably was as good as it could be when he was driving, and there was no stories of him having an accident. This didn't seem to really get his morale up that way, and he still fought with this. As he got married, his wife always did the driving, and he felt very bad about that. But the skills he did have, the family relied on very strongly. My mother was not a tidy and organised person. She was lovely, but she totally relied on my father to find things, to know where things were. She never carried the door keys all her married life until my father died, because she always was losing them. If we were out, it was, Joe, that's my father's name, where have we left the car? How do I get to the car from here? And right the way through, she was totally reliant on my father for organisation and support. My father helped in the family business in the end, and he was in charge of the warehouse. He couldn't see what was on the boxes. By this stage, his sight was getting worse, but he was brilliant. He always knew what stock was in, made sure that Mum ordered and got new supplies being ordered in time. Everything was under control. He was there behind the scenes. He didn't recognise that as a skill, but I think it was. And what was my view of him as my father, as a child who couldn't see? Well, first of all, it was a shock, my being born. They had no idea it could be inherited. They didn't want this problem of jealousy of a brother or sister, so as soon as they realised I had aniridia, they decided to have no more children. They wanted to centre all their energies and help in helping me grow up. They didn't want to make the same mistakes as my grandparents, so instead of stopping me from doing things, they just didn't tell me they were difficult. I really thought I was the same as everybody else, as my parents didn't talk about it. In many ways, it followed the family history. My grandparents didn't talk about it with my father, but that was to protect him from all the bad things. My parents didn't talk about it, so I didn't have low expectations. They expected me to try hard, and they pushed me hard to try and try again. Not a bad thing, because it did help me to develop a fighting spirit, that I didn't give up easily, and my family will still say I'm pretty pig-headed and determined, and in many ways you have to be like that if you have a disability, not just aniridia, any disability. You have to fight and struggle on, and sometimes try and invent new ways around things. Like Harry at school, I had problems with socialising and things in the playground. I had problems with teachers having low expectations and not understanding my partial sight. It's always easier somehow to say nobody sees anything. Much harder to understand if you can see part. I remember my mother telling me many years afterwards that she had to go into the school when I was 5 and learning to write, that I understood what a semicircle was and I understood what a stick was, But I didn't understand that when you wrote the letter A, lowercase, that you had to join them up and they had to touch each other. And with a bit of tuition and analysis of why I was finding writing difficult, and some explanations and somebody sitting over my shoulder and helping me to know the things I was missing, I became to write quite well. But still we had to struggle with that low expectations throughout life. I too was not sent to the blind school that was still going in Bristol when I grew up here. My parents also ended up paying for my school so that I didn't have to go away to boarding, because it would have been boarding in my day. My people around me didn't always understand why things were difficult, and I didn't always understand either. And I think one of the lessons I learnt and tried to apply when my children were growing up, that they understood why certain things were difficult, not to actually let them get on a bandwagon and say, I don't have to do it because I can't see, but to actually to say what's difficult and how it can be improved. Understanding that putting things that are high contrast on a background is no good giving me, like we have on here today, we've got white papers on a white tablecloth and transparent glasses. Yes, absolutely lethal. But of course, you can. I was so excited when I found you could buy blue glasses rather than transparent ones, and all these pretty ones made such a difference. So much a reduction in accidents. Because if you knock things over, as Harry said, you think you're clumsy. And everybody else will tell you you're clumsy if they don't understand that just by changing the glass, you would see it. I found it difficult at school, always falling over so much, always having bloody knees and scrapes and things, right into my teenage. And in fact, only last month, I landed up tripping over something small and having that humiliation of lying on the pavement. It does do something for your morale, to then have a cut nose and cuts on your forehead. Oh, they've healed now, but the shock and the morale that it hits still lingers a little, I'm afraid. Though I understand it more now, I still want to rebel. That's my pig-headedness. I think the other things that I didn't realise that aniridia affected was the other parts of the body, and realising that things like the audio processing disorder that a good percentage of us have. It was only 3 years ago when I went to the audiologist consequent to an Aniridia conference. I took my youngest daughter thinking I must get her tested because she's still at school to see if this is making an impact on her. And at the same I walked in, they said, "Oh, Mum, can we test you as well? More research, great." And I said, "Yes, okay." But came out really finding that I'd lived for over 50 years with audio processing. And now could make sense of some of the things I found difficult at school. Things like taking notes while listening to things, listening to lectures at university or other places. Yes, I found that terribly difficult, and I really thought there was something wrong with me, not in a physical sense, that link missing in the brain, but actually that I had learning difficulties, or there was something abnormal about me. And I went through quite a mental crisis because I hadn't been told that my vision would have problems. Things like I was the only girl in the class when I was 13 who still couldn't walk across the beam in the gym. I think I would like somebody to have said, "It's okay." It's almost impossible when you haven't got any three-dimensional vision to actually be able to do that. So it's not being condescending, not overprotecting, but helping people understand so that they can face what their own situation is and then share it sometimes with others. We were talking about, do you get children to talk to others? Yes. And when and how is difficult. But I think it's one of those issues that these things come on us slowly. Our own understanding is slower as well. The attitude of others can really impact on our lives very, very strongly. So when I did get married, there was an awful lot of pressure on me from family, in-laws and strangers who really didn't know me or how well I coped with my foresight, that I shouldn't have children. It was immoral. That I wouldn't be able to cope. That assumption that as somebody with I couldn't possibly be a full mother. And I almost could hear what my father was saying about himself. I was almost saying it about myself as well. It was imposed on those around us. And many times, I think, as a parent, I've landed up trying to explain to others, to as the word was used earlier, be an advocate for them. Naomi, who's here today, will still remember the teacher at school who really who challenged me and said, I don't think your daughter's vision is as bad as you think it is. And I said, well, give me an example. You know, why do you think that? Oh, well, she can always find me in the classroom when she wants to. And I looked at her and I thought, I like that red jacket you're wearing. Brilliant red jacket. So I was very naughty. But to convince her, and purely for Naomi's benefit, I said to her, would you kindly put your red jacket on the back of one of the chairs? And then get somebody to send Naomi with a book and say, go and give that to your teacher. And it worked brilliantly. Naomi walked up to the red jacket and wanted to give it the book. So there is that sort of lack of belief from others, but it's the understanding, and if we can combine our knowledge and our explanation, we can make a difference. Other things, it's all through life, that difficulty of keeping a balance. It is really hard. I certainly still get morale dips, and my family will tell you I get really upset about things changing and my not being able to cope. My vision has got worse as I've got older, but I can honestly say that in retrospect, if you told me 10 years ago I'd be still working, commuting, cooking, doing what I'm doing now, with the level of vision I've got now, I'd have laughed at you 10 years ago. Because I was quite frightened and bewildered, and I still am. That next stage, the next 10 years, is a concern. Will I be able to? But hopefully in 10 years I'll be able to stand up and say, I've learnt more. I've understood more about my sight, I've understood more about my background and how it's come about. Whether I will have kept that good balance, and I did try with children to do this balance between not being overprotective and not being brutal and not letting them know. It's what I was aiming at. I can't claim to have achieved it. I think it's an ongoing issue. It's been an advantage at times and a disadvantage. I think the children seeing how my sight has got worse might make it a little bit more frightening for them. But on the other hand, technology's improved. There's much more going for them. It doesn't mean they're not going to have a hard time, but I think things are going to be much better for them than they were for my father and for me. Each generation, there is more help, more understanding out there. In London, we have iBuses that talk to you, that announce what the next stop is. Yeah? School? Well, great innovation when I was at school and I wasn't keeping up with note-taking. and other things. Schools suggested, well, there are these new inventions, you know, these compact cassette recorders? They're quite portable, you know. So I carried one to every lesson, and then went home in the evening and played the lessons back, taking notes, stopping the tape so I could take the notes, and then starting it, listening a bit, take notes. It was great at university. I had great street cred, well, it wasn't called street cred in those days, but I took the best notes in all the university. If you missed a lecture, ask Mary, she's got better notes than anyone else. But nowadays we've got laptops and computers, and we are struggling with schools getting networks and enough student support. I'm off to a meeting on Wednesday in London with the London Society for the Blind to try and get agenda up on what's available for children going to college and, you know, and other things, and getting jobs in the future. Always much to learn. Funds have cut back drastically. Naomi had, you know, her statement support was good. She had quite a lot of hours available to her. I think one of the lessons I remember Naomi always saying, she didn't want the support worker just to take her aside. She liked being in a small group where all the group got a bit of attention, and she was one of the small group. That made her feel better. Ask Naomi more about that yourself, she's here, so I won't speak for Naomi on that. She will also say, the story I remember Naomi telling a group of young people who were at my house who had a visual impairment, that I never wanted my children to get away with playing what we call the blind card. You know, playing on people's... We don't want people to pity us, but on the other times, there are times when young people, as they grow up particularly, want to get away with not doing things. And one young man said, oh, well, I never tried my own shoelaces until I was 13. You know, Mum always did it for me because she could see and I couldn't. And Naomi turned around and said, you lucky so-and-so. I had a blind mother, and what did she say? And I sat there going, oh, what did I say? Yes, dear, it's tough. I'll show you how to do it. And I think that, in a way, it's been my philosophy. Yes, I've had to show things in a different way. I didn't show her using shoelaces. I believe I showed her in the same way as my father showed me, using a thick, long dressing gown cord. Much easier for me to feel and to follow her fingers on it as well. It's good to actually start drawing to a close, and I think, as you see, this is a personal story. Aniridia has affected my family. I've had it. 2 out of my 3 children have it. My third child, who doesn't have it, well, quite honestly, I think he has as many problems, and he would claim that to his sisters, as they have. Different problems, granted. And I think, as was said earlier, I also believe that having difficulties and having to fight them and think my way around it, I hope I've been able to support others in troubles, where some people who've been healthy all their lives and have had no problems at all really cannot cope. They have an obstacle that comes up their way, and they struggle. And they certainly, I can name quite a few without, nobody present, have no sympathy for other people, no understanding, getting in other people's skins, trying to see things from their point of view. So, yes, my son doesn't have aniridia, but he's got hearing problems, he has migraines, he has this, that and the other. Yes, we all have problems, and I think having aniridia is just only one thing that can go wrong for a baby. Most people have things they can't do. At least through Aniridia Group and understanding, we can understand what we've got to deal with. And let's make use of it and help others, encourage others. Don't let us stop us doing things. Parenting, academic, work. We may have to do things differently. We may not be able to do the things we want to do, like drive a car. Oh, I'd love to be able to drive. Yeah, or we can have a go on the. We can have a go with the. There are clubs where you can have a go as a blind person on an airfield and that sort of experience driving. But I just like the practicalities of not having to hump heavy luggage and all the rest of it. But then there's lots of other people who can't drive. People with epilepsy, all sorts of other things. We're not the only ones. And so fight on. Learn more, use your knowledge and share, and grow with it. Life is ahead, it doesn't end just because you have Aniridia. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions? We've got a few minutes to the next scheduled time.
Say that about driving, but I was told I was working in engineering. I couldn't drive a forklift because I hadn't got a car licence. When I got made redundant, you know what I went to do? Got funding to get a forklift licence. It is possible.
Yes, yeah. But I think my comment is knowing your boundaries and being honest about them is important. It's rather like the people who say to me, you can't look after children, you can't babysit. You can't be a mother, and you can't look after my children. And yet, the people, when I did look after other people's children, I did explain, I'd never go and look after their children in their homes. I always said, bring the children to my home, where I'm in control, I know where the plug sockets are, I know, all the danger points. Yes, but I did it within boundaries where I knew I could do my job adequately. I didn't try taking babysitting on or pretending that I could watch children a long way away in the park playing on the slides. I never did that. But I did the other things. I did what I could do, yes. But like you, the forklift trucks, if you knew you had the vision and you have to be honest about it, that can be tough.
Mary, can you say something about the audio processing difficulties that you may
In retrospect, when Dr. Bamboo came and gave our lecture to here, and I believe, is it still up on our radio?
It's
still up there
video
on the website.
Conference 2011, I think, in Birmingham.
Yes, Birmingham. Yeah. It was really interesting. I sat there listening and saying, that applies to me. You did the same, yeah. And it is worth, it's part of that information, isn't it? Worth you knowing about it to see. You were talking about loud noises. I've always hated loud noises, and especially, and I get quite disorientated. If there's a drill out somebody drilling in the road, or a fire alarm going, it does something to me, when normally I'm very good at finding my way around a building, and you put a fire alarm on, and I really get a little bit, it is really strange what it does to me. But Dr. Babb says that's one of the things that sort of happens. When we went to the hospital, what was fascinating was that, and I forgot to say this earlier, my children are similar to me, but they're not the same. And I think that's something I had to learn the hard way. So that when we went for the audio processing disorder, I found the test fascinated me. So that two of the ones, which will explain some of the problems, Mark, you wear headphones while you're being tested, and they're reading 4 numbers into one ear and 4 numbers into the other. It might be 42, 21, 16 and 12, and then you've got another set coming at you, the other ear. And then they ask you to repeat back what numbers you heard. And I came out and I'd done, and the audiologist was quite impressed. She said, you only got 1 wrong. I said, that's good. That's good. That was really nice. I didn't know one could do that. And then the next test, it was 3 sounds. Just 3 bleeps, right? And now, they told me that each bleep would either be a high bleep or a low bleep. So I sat there going, 1 bleep, heard that one, number 2, heard number 3. And then they said, now what did you hear? What were they low? What was the first one, low or high? Can't remember. Second one? And I sat there thinking, oh, I can't do this. And I came out with less than 20%. And yet I got 90% remembering 8 numbers, and I came out with 20% not being able to tell you whether I'd heard high or low pitches. It was really, really... And the audiologist went round to the specialist, she was new, and they said, and the Dr. Bounder told me afterwards, the lady who took the test thought the machinery had gone wrong, because she couldn't believe he'd got high on one score and so low on the next one. And then my daughter, who went through the same test, got about within 5% of the same answers as mine. The ones I was low on, she was low on. The ones I was high on, she was high on. And that was interesting. So it was, and the other thing, Mark always worried about singing songs in hymns at church. I've been to church not absolutely every week of my life, but certainly every month, within 2 or 3 times every month of my life. And yet you asked me to sing a single hymn that I've sung all those years, I couldn't do it. There's something wrong about my memorising songs and music. If you asked me to start singing Happy Birthday now, I couldn't. But if somebody started singing it, I could hum along. Yes, I'd recognise it, I know what it was. But it was... Oh, and I gave up music over it, because I could... Like Harry, I liked playing the piano. And I'd play the piano and they say, now hum back the tune just done from sight music, from when... This is when I was young and could see enough to read music. I couldn't do it. I couldn't remember what I just played. And that... I didn't understand then. What's so nice now is knowing it isn't my fault. I'm not got learning difficulties. It's the genuine problem of having that condition. And it's rather like understanding that, yes, you can see steps going up with the shadows there, but you can fall down them and you can't see the same steps going down. And not not to make fun of a child. Does that sort of answer some of the questions?
Yes, thank you.
It's not a hearing problem, it's a brain issue.
Sorry?
It's not hearing, it's brain.
Oh yes, it's not hearing, it's brain, yes.
You can hear perfectly well, but your brain can't process it properly, is the issue.
Yes. So you can hear a lecture, like today, but I couldn't possibly take notes or exactly memorise all that I heard. I could follow it when I was listening, but the problem, I need to listen to it several times to take it in.
From my understanding of it is, the same axis gene mutation that causes the aniridia causes a mutation in the corpus callosum, which is the superhighway between the 2 halves of the brain.
That's right.
And what happens is, if you're trying to do something and there's external things going on around you, it can overload the brain, and it basically decides to stop processing information until the external information goes away.
So I can live in another world. I can be quite happily, listening to the radio while I'm doing something fairly like washing up, because my brain's not occupied in that. But somebody else comes into the room and says, "Mum, do you know what the time is?" And I was freak, in the sense that I can, if I'm not careful, I can be snappy. Although I can be snappy at most times, I know, but I don't know. But it doesn't, it really. Or is it just because I'm getting old? It could be, because and this is the problem. What do you attribute things to? You can't attribute everything to aniridia. Some of it's me as well. Yeah?
Okay.
I think that's enough for me.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary.